Well, baby, I'm on it with a bottle of wine and an old dirt road, and ready to go if you want to. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us today. Live Music Nation podcast. I'm your host, Jake Gill, Festival Edition. We're today with Michael Bennett. He's with the Prog Day. Am I saying that right, Michael?
Yes, you are.
All right. Progressive Rock Festival. I'm looking forward to this. Michael, thanks for joining us. Give us a little background on you. Talk a little bit about your upbringing and your family and your career.
Well, from a career standpoint, I'm an artist and a graphic designer, but I also do wear a lot of other hats. The reason I'm in the festival situation is because I'm a big music fan, and that's because as a kid, I was an Air Force brat and I moved around a lot, and music was one of the things I took with me as I went from place to place. So I became a huge music fan, and that just sort of became integrated into things that I did. You know, I've art directed music magazines before, and I've worked with other festivals, and so yeah, Prog Day was when it started, basically kind of in my backyard. I became involved with it.
Very cool. Well, hey, I don't want to skip over your career a little bit. I love what you have behind you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So have you done album art for either yourself or for other musicians out there?
I have.
Yeah.
I think it was in the 90s when I did my first CD cover. But yeah, I've done quite a bit of that, and probably not for artists that you would be familiar with, because they're all progressive rock artists and
Sure.
not like big name artists, you know. But I'm also, there's a group of labels called the Laser's Edge Group that I'm the house designer for. And as I mentioned a minute ago, I was actually the art director of Progression magazine for a number of years. I took them from a black and white publication into a color publication period, and made that transition with them. And then when I started getting involved in Prog Day, I've been doing the art for the festival ever since the very first year in '95, and I just kept getting more and more involved in the festival until eventually I ended up becoming the guy.
Yeah, art is much more prevalent in that scene. Like, you'll even from concert promotion posters, it just is such a big part of that. So that's exciting. Super talented in what you do. We checked out some of your work. Let's jump into this festival. Let's talk about the when and the where.
Well, it's always on Labor Day weekend.
Okay.
With the exception of one year, it always happens on Labor Day weekend. It's right outside Chapel Hill in North Carolina. And the venue is called Storybook Farm. Actually, Prog Day is the only event of its type that takes place there.
Okay.
It used to be a teaching farm, and the property was actually acquired by a new owner over the last few years, and he's actually keen to expand that property into other events as well. But it's essentially, the venue itself is essentially a large covered stage at one end of a grassy field surrounded by forest. And
yeah,
it's a real nice outdoor environment for the festival to occur in.
Okay, great. So the three questions that listeners really want to know is what does it look like? What does it smell like, meaning food? And what does it sound like, meaning music? What are they going to hear? So let's go back to the look like. Describe that setting for us.
Well, it's a very beautiful setting. You know, it's very green and lush with all of the, with the forest and the trees around it. The grounds are actually, I don't know how they keep it the way they do, but it's got this kind of immaculate lawn that makes a really nice area to hang out on, lay out your blankets and your chairs.
Sure.
When the event happens, it's actually, one of the things that I like about the event is that the audience really is what crafts the experience of the event. Unlike any other kinds of shows that I've been to, sort of organically over the years, we have a group of regular attendees that tend to come every year, and they've slowly developed this sort of culture around the festival. So you have people that bring pop-up shelters and things like that. It's almost like a caravan that decided to make camp over the course of the weekend, for 2 days there on the property. So
Sure.
there's this little city of little dwellings that pop up there, and there's a large covered picnic shelter where there'll be a food vendor. We have different people come in at different times. We've had everything from barbecue to Greek food. So
Okay.
it just sort of depends on who we because it's a modest festival. We only have one food vendor that
Okay.
we have sponsored there. We also have a local craft brewer that comes in and pours beer over the weekend for us. And there's a vendor tent where the artists have merchandise tables and where
Uh-huh.
other people can come and sell things as well.
Very good. Very good. All right, let's jump into the music, because this is a passion of yours, and I love what you talk about. Music kind of being the one commonality as you were moving through life as a child, as a military child. So let's jump into this a little bit. Give our listeners some samples of acts you've had in the past, styles, and talk a little bit about that.
Well, the thing about progressive rock is that it's a term that hasn't really been used very consistently over the years. So it can be really confusing as to what it is. The way Prog Day uses it is the way that the term originally cropped up, in my experience, which was as an umbrella term to cover music that didn't really sound like anything else. In fact, that was, as Frank Zappa famously said one time when asked what progressive rock was, it's the stuff that doesn't sound like everything else. Which back in the 60s, late 60s and the 70s, when all this was coming around, was a lot of different disparate kinds of music. If you could find a progressive rock section in a music store, you'd find bands that a lot of people might be familiar with, like Yes and Genesis and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Pink Floyd and bands like that. But you'd also find electronic acts like Tangerine Dream and Klaus Schultz, and you would find some fusion acts like Magma from France, or even if you want to go more straight fusion, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever, those kinds of bands. Eventually, a lot of those genres or those styles of music ended up being considered their own genres, and they are considered separately by a lot of people. But for the purposes of Prog Day, we still use that umbrella term. So when you come to Prog Day, you might hear a space rock band, you might hear a fusion band, you might hear a neoclassical chamber rock band, you might hear an avant-garde band, you might hear a symphonic band, a lot of different things. The diversity is one of the, I think, one of the draws for a lot of the regular attendees that come to the festival.
Yeah.
And also what we're trying to do is, even within the progressive rock niche that there is out there, there's still a lot of bands that don't get exposure because the music that they do is a little bit even outside of what progressive rock fans might be looking for. And so one of the things that Prog Day focuses on is giving exposure to a lot of that kind of music that's outside the box that would not be heard otherwise.
How do you find your acts?
Lots of different ways. I mean, one of the main ways is that there's, myself and a lot of other people that are involved in the organization go out of their way to sort of stay on top of what's out there and who the new people are that are coming around and all of that. But, we get submissions from bands all the time. There are people that are always making suggestions about bands. We also do research on different forums to see what people are talking about on the progressive rock forums. So I use all of these different resources to put the lineup together every year.
Perfect. Okay, a couple fun questions, because you did a great job of describing the event for everybody. Best concert you've ever seen, Michael?
Well, I'm sure you get this a lot from people that are into music. That's kind of an impossible one to answer, just because of the variety of music that I listen to and the number of concerts I've been to over the year. But I would say that, in terms of, the series of shows, I have to say that Prog Day itself has definitely hosted some of the best shows that I've ever seen. And there's also a progressive rock festival that sort of grew out of Prog Day called Nearfest, that became the largest progressive rock festival in the United States before it was finally retired. And there were some amazing performances there because they actually had the budget to bring over a lot of legacy acts from the 70s and so on, as well as current acts from Europe that we would not have otherwise seen here in the United States. So, you know, I have to, rather than an individual show, I would have to say those series of shows would be what I would have to point to as some of my best experiences for sure.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll let you skirt that question. Second question.
I did, didn't I?
Second question, though, you can't get away from, and that is purely and simply, dead or alive, one act that you've never seen that you want to see or wanted to see.
I never had a chance to actually see Jimi Hendrix play live.
Okay.
And you know, in person. That's somebody that I personally would have liked to have seen perform, just on my bucket list, you know.
Sure.
You know, it's the old T-shirt. I may be old, but I saw all the cool bands.
Right.
That's true to a large extent, but Hendrix was one of the performers that I never actually got to see live.
No, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, I've been a little selfish with my questions today, a little demanding. This is a segment of the show you get to ask me a question. Michael, what would you ask me?
Well, you're an entertainer, that you create music and all of that. So, you know, do you have a particular process that you use when you're creating your art? Is there a particular goal that you have in mind, or is it kind of all over the place?
Yeah, no, I think the longer that I'm in the business, I do songwrite more specifically for something, whether it's I'm looking for a summer anthem, or but I'm still really do a lot based on my emotions, and that's, man, that's been huge for me, just from the
So you're really interested in the feel, the kind of the vibe that comes out of the music that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. How about you when you're creating art? What is that process like for you? Is it random? Is it planned? How does that work? If we compared your creativity to what I do with music.
Well, it depends on the piece, and it also depends on the particular time in my life that we're talking about.
Okay.
My early process was very intellectual, in that, I mean, I was going for an emotional, expressive result at the end, but
Right.
it was a process where I would come up with a concept, and then I would come up with imagery to communicate that concept, and then there would be preliminary sketches, and then there would be final sketches, and then it would go to, you know, the final board or paper or whatever, and then I would render it in. But the stuff that I'm working on right now, which is basically acrylic paintings, a lot of my earlier work was a lot of colored pencil stuff. The pieces that are behind me are acrylic paintings. And in the case of these paintings, the very first time I started to do an acrylic painting, I thought it would be sort of a continuation of what I'd already been doing, except it would be in acrylic paints on larger canvases. And ultimately, after I finished the first one, I completely changed everything. What I decided was that it was the spontaneity of the creative act that was really motivating me to move me through the piece. So when I sit down in front of a canvas, and this is true actually of all of the pieces that are behind me, I had absolutely no idea of what I was going to do when I sat down. I had a color palette in mind, and then something made me make a mark on the canvas, and then it becomes like an improv where I do a stimulus response with what I'm seeing on the canvas. And at some point during the process, it starts to tell me what it wants to be. So it may become representational, or more or less, or it may become completely abstract, or the colors may change on it. You know, it just sort of depends on the individual piece. And one of the things that I like about that is that it keeps me creatively engaged throughout the entire process of creating the piece, as opposed to my previous process where all the creativity was on the front end. You know, all the artistic engagement was on the front end, and then the back end was just a rendering job. So it became more of a technical exercise.
Yes, sir.
You know.
Yes, sir.
So like you, I'm going for how it makes you feel.
Yeah. No, that's excellent way. Absolutely. Cool. Michael, how do people find out more information about your event and tickets and things like that?
Well, the best way, of course, is to go to our website, which is progday.net, day.net. But we also have a Facebook page. And between those two, you can find out everything that's currently going on with the festival.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Michael, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Jake, thank you for the invitation. It was fun talking with you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, baby, I'm on it with a